What could make a forbidden love story the most unforgettable in Hong Kong history? He was a dazzling superstar, idolized across Asia, with fame, fortune, and beauty others could only dream of. But behind the bright lights, Leslie Cheung harbored a secret. A love so deep it defied society, and so fragile it was pushed into the shadows. This was no ordinary romance, but a relationship that exploded on stage, challenged deeply ingrained stereotypes, and ended in heartbreaking tragedy. Beneath the dazzling stage lights of the 1980s, Hong Kong was the cradle of Asia's brightest stars. And among countless voices, among the endless wave of new faces, one name burst forth with an impact so powerful it left an indelible mark: Leslie Cheung. He was not only a singer and an actor, but a cultural icon, a figure whose every step captivated the public. With his sharp features, eyes that carried both intensity and melancholy, and a voice that could melt thousands of hearts, Leslie became the embodiment of romance, talent, and charisma. In 1984, the song Monica exploded onto the scene and instantly became a phenomenon. It wasn't just a song, it was the turning point that propelled his name beyond Hong Kong, resonating across Asia. During those concerts, tens of thousands of fans screamed his name. The glow of countless light sticks filled the arenas like a galaxy of stars, and at the very center of it all stood Leslie Cheung, an artist basking in the most glorious moments of his career. Monica was more than a lively pop track. It symbolized youth, ambition, and freedom, values that Leslie himself would chase throughout his life. But behind the roaring applause, behind the giant posters plastered across the city, and behind the ever-present smile he wore for the public, there was a deep emptiness in Leslie's heart. That emptiness did not come from a lack of fame or fortune. He had both in abundance. It came from love. A love that everyone should have the right to live openly, but for him, at that time, it was impossible to reveal. In Hong Kong during the 1980s and 1990s, society was still burdened by heavy prejudice against the LGBTQ+ community. In the entertainment world, where the image of a star was tied to ideals of perfection and conventional male-female romance, to admit same-sex love was almost unthinkable. For many, it could mean the end of a career. And no one understood this more than Leslie Cheung himself. He knew that one honest confession, one unguarded gaze, could make the world turn its back on him. Yet the heart cannot be commanded, and love does not wait for the right time or the right place. At the very height of his fame, when the press praised him and millions of fans adored him, Leslie Cheung carried a secret. That secret was the profound love he held for another man, a man who would later be known to the world as his lifelong partner for over 20 years, Daffy Tong. Behind the curtains, when the lights dimmed and the music stopped, when the crowds went home, Leslie returned to his private room, where loneliness lingered like a shadow. And in those quiet moments, there was only one person who stayed by his side, who listened and shared his burdens, who filled the void in his heart. Behind the glittering spotlight, there was another Leslie Cheung, a man who yearned for love, who longed to live authentically. Every time he stood on stage, he lit up the world. But when he returned to solitude, a question haunted him. Can I be both an artist and a man who loves sincerely without having to sacrifice one for the other? That was the greatest conflict of his life. On one side stood a magnificent career, where he was idolized as the flawless star. On the other stood a pure, simple love, but one fraught with risks if it was ever revealed. And at this crossroads, Leslie Cheung made a choice that would move millions to tears in the years that followed. He chose love. From the peak of his career onward, Leslie's story was no longer just about conquering music and cinema. It became a ballad of love, a love tested by prejudice, hidden beneath fame, but ultimately immortalized as legend. Perhaps That is the eternal allure of Leslie Cheung. He didn't just show the audience a star, he showed the world a human being. A heart that dared to love, dared to ache, and dared to live fully. Under the dazzling lights, what made him choose love over career? And before we dive deeper into this unforgettable love story, let me ask you, the viewer watching this video, where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and let me know. The early 1980s in Hong Kong were a time of both turbulence and opportunity. The city was alive with neon lights, bustling streets, and an entertainment industry hungry for fresh talent. Leslie Cheung, already beginning to make his mark as a singer, found himself at a crossroads. He was ambitious, eager to expand beyond music, and ready to prove that his artistry could transcend the stage. It was during this pivotal moment in his life that destiny quietly introduced him to someone who would change everything: Daffy Tong. Their first meeting was not wrapped in fireworks or the glamour of the spotlight. It was quiet, almost ordinary to an outsider, but to Leslie, it was unforgettable. Daffy was not the type to chase fame or revel in attention. He was reserved, intelligent, and carried with him a calm steadiness, the kind of presence Leslie had longed for in the whirlwind of celebrity life. From that first encounter, a connection began to form, subtle but powerful, like a spark that refuses to fade. As Leslie began his transition into acting, their relationship grew alongside his career. In 1982, he starred in Nomad, a film that challenged conventions with its daring themes of youth, rebellion, and existential searching. Leslie's performance was raw and magnetic, showing audiences that he was more than just a singer with a charming smile. He was an actor capable of depth and complexity. Behind the scenes, though, away from the critical acclaim and rising stardom, was a young man slowly falling in love, learning what it meant to have someone who saw him not as a star, but as a person. By the mid-1980s, Leslie's fame was spreading. Crowds filled theaters, magazines printed his face on every cover, and directors were beginning to recognize his unique ability to blend vulnerability with strength. In 1987, he appeared in A Better Tomorrow 2, part of John Woo's iconic crime series. This film solidified his reputation as one of the most versatile actors of his generation. On screen, he was intense, charismatic, and unforgettable. Off-screen, however, he was cherishing something far more intimate: stolen moments of peace with Daffy Tong. For Daffy, life with Leslie meant living in the shadows. He gave up his promising career in finance to quietly become Leslie's anchor, the one constant in a world where everything else seemed temporary. In public, they could not openly display affection. They had to be careful, cautious, almost invisible as a couple. But in private, their bond deepened with each passing year. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about the quiet comfort of companionship, about having someone to share late-night conversations, unspoken worries, and small joys that no one else could see. The irony was striking. While Leslie's life on screen was filled with action, intensity, and recognition, his real love story was taking place in silence. It was a relationship that had to be hidden from the world, yet it gave him the strength to keep performing, to keep pushing himself as an artist. Daffy became his refuge, the person who grounded him when the noise of fame became too loud, the person who reminded him that behind the applause and flashing cameras, he was still just a man in need of love and belonging. It was during these early years together that the foundation of their relationship was built: trust, sacrifice, and an unspoken promise to stand by each other no matter what storms came their way. The world saw Leslie rising as a superstar, the singer of Monica, the actor of Nomad, and A Better Tomorrow 2. But Daffy saw the vulnerable soul behind the fame, the one who laughed freely in private and worried endlessly about the cost of his choices. Every love story has its beginning, and for Leslie and Daffy, the 1980s were that sacred beginning. It was not the kind of romance celebrated with headlines or applauded by society, but it was real, fragile, and quietly unbreakable. What they shared during those years would become the thread woven through every triumph and every tragedy to come. And so, as Leslie's star rose higher in the film sky, his relationship with Daffy grew deeper, invisible to the crowd, but shining brightly in the silence between songs, between films, amid the chaos of fame. It was a love that was cultivated in silence, but destined to walk alongside every triumph and sorrow. Soon, as Leslie's artistic talent rose to new heights, that secret love would blend with music and film, shaping not only the man, but the legend he would become. By the late 1980s, Leslie Cheung had become a force to be reckoned with. His career was flourishing, his artistic talent was growing, and his influence extended far beyond Hong Kong. In the eyes of the public, he was untouchable, a shining star whose every move was celebrated, whose voice and charisma could lift a generation. But behind the flashy exterior, a quieter, softer story was slowly being revealed, a story that few people knew at the time. Daffy Tong, the man who quietly entered Leslie's life, made a choice more dramatic than any confession. He gave up his promising career in finance to steadfastly support the man he loved. It was not an easy decision. Giving up a stable career, a stable life, and the comfort of anonymity to take on the uncertain, often hidden role of being someone's rock in the shadows required courage and dedication of the highest order. But Daffy did it without hesitation. He knew Leslie needed more than praise. He needed someone who could help him stay grounded as the tide of fame rose. This sacrifice was not reported in the tabloids or written about in the headlines. It was invisible, almost unspoken, but it was all there. Because while the world watched Leslie conquer the screen and the stage, what kept him grounded, what allowed him to shine so brightly, was the love that waited for him off stage. In 1987, Leslie starred in Rouge, a hauntingly beautiful film about love, loss, and longing. His performance was mesmerizing, full of nuance and emotion almost too real, as if he was painting something very personal. Audiences were captivated, critics praised him, and his reputation as one of Hong Kong's finest actors was cemented. Behind the camera, however, Daffy was there. The quiet supporter, never asking for recognition, who just wanted Leslie to keep reaching higher, knowing that he would always be there to catch him if he fell. The following year, in 1988, Leslie released Silence is Golden. Its bittersweet melody and poignant lyrics touched the hearts of countless listeners, becoming a hymn to quiet strength and dignity. Many people understood the song in their own way, but for those who knew his story, it reflected his life. A love that flourished in silence, a devotion that did not need the spotlight, but gave Leslie the courage to face the world. What made their love extraordinary was not flashiness or drama, it was persistence. While Leslie dazzled on stage with elaborate costumes and emotional performances, Daffy took care of the little things, schedules, routines, the details that no one cared about but made all the difference. Love in their world was more than passion. It was partnership. It was about ensuring that in the midst of the storm of fame, Leslie never felt alone. And this is where the beauty of their story comes from. Art and love were not two separate paths in Leslie's life. They went hand in hand, side by side, shaping each other. His greatest works of the late 80s and early 90s carried an emotional weight that could only come from a man who truly understood love, who truly understood what it meant to be loved and cherished. Meanwhile, Daffy's devotion gave Leslie the freedom to push boundaries, to act fearlessly, to sing from the heart, because he knew that no matter how loud the outside world, there was always peace waiting at home. Their relationship seemed invisible to most, but its imprint was everywhere. In every heartbreaking ballad, in every emotional performance, there is Daffy's mark. Invisible, nameless, yet so profound. It is proof that sometimes the most powerful loves are not the ones that are broadcast to the world, but the ones that live quietly, faithfully, day after day. Looking back, we can see how important this relationship was. Without Daffy's sacrifice, without his unwavering support, would Leslie have reached the heights he did? Probably not. Every legend needs a foundation, and for Leslie, that foundation was love. A love that asks nothing in return, but gives everything it has. For the LGBTQ+ community and for anyone who has ever loved in silence, their story holds a profound lesson. True love is not about flashy gestures or public recognition. It's about understanding, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. It's about walking through fire together, even when the world refuses to see or accept you. Leslie and Daffy show us that two men can build a relationship as strong, tender, and lasting as any love story in history. Their love reminds us that behind every great artist, behind every shining star, there may be someone who quietly lifts them up. Someone who chooses devotion over self-interest, someone who sacrifices so the other can soar. And that's not weakness, it's strength in its purest form. If this story has touched your heart, please cherish it. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of courage, art, and the power of love, support this channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing. Together, let's keep these voices alive and these legacies remembered. By the early 1990s, Leslie Cheung had established himself as a superstar in Asia. His concerts were selling out, his albums topped the charts, and his screen performances showed an artist unafraid to take risks. But 1993 marked the year that catapulted him into the international spotlight, not just as a Hong Kong icon, but as one of the most revered actors in world cinema. That year, Leslie Cheung took on the role of Cheung in Farewell My Concubine, directed by Chen Kaige. It was a challenging role, the tragic tale of a Peking opera actor whose life becomes entangled with art, identity, and unrequited love. The character was both fragile and resilient, both strong and broken, and in Leslie Cheung's hands, it was unforgettable. When the film premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, audiences were awestruck. It was a performance so layered, yet so haunting, that it left critics speechless. Farewell My Concubine won the Palme d'Or, the top prize at Cannes, cementing Leslie Cheung's status not just as a star of Hong Kong cinema, but as an internationally recognized artist. For many, it was a revelation. Here was an Asian actor whose sensitivity, charisma, and emotional authenticity could rival any performance on the global screen. Yet behind that triumph, Leslie's heart bore another, more private truth, one that had been hidden for too long. The world admired his artistry, but they did not know the man who gave him strength. For more than a decade, Natalie Tong was his silent partner, the one who sacrificed his career, the one who stood in the shadows, the one who asked for nothing but gave everything. Their love was spent in silence, in whispers, in gazes. But by the mid-1990s, Leslie was no longer content to remain hidden. He had played tragic lovers, repressed men, and he understood better than anyone that art cannot heal if the truth remains unspoken. In 1997, at his legendary Countdown concert in Hong Kong, Leslie did something no one expected. Standing on stage in front of thousands of fans, his voice trembling not with fear but with confidence, he introduced Daffy Tong, not as a friend, not as a companion, but as my love, my partner. In that moment, the entire auditorium erupted. The applause was thunderous. The energy was explosive. It was more than a declaration of love. It was an act of defiance, a moment of truth that broke decades of silence. For an Asian superstar in the 1990s, such words were unprecedented. This was an era when same-sex relationships were rarely acknowledged, let alone celebrated, especially in the entertainment industry. In saying those words, Leslie put everything on the line: his career, his endorsements, his legacy. But he did it anyway, because for him, love was never something to hide. That night, Leslie also performed his emotional cover of "The Moon Represents My Heart." The melody was gentle, the lyrics simple yet profound. "You ask me how deep is my love? The moon is my heart." To many fans, it was just a beautiful ballad. But to those who understood, it was a love letter, a message delivered through music to the man sitting quietly in the crowd, the man Leslie had just introduced to the world. This was more than just a concert. It was a revolution in its own right. Leslie Cheung, at the height of his fame, had chosen to be true to himself. He was not only an icon of music and cinema, but also a symbol of courage for countless people who had been silenced, who had hidden their true selves, who had buried their love in fear. For the LGBTQ+ community across Asia, his words were a beacon, proof that even in a society bound by tradition and prejudice, it was possible to stand up and say, "This is me. This is the person I love." From that night on, Leslie and Daffy were no longer a whispered secret in Hong Kong's entertainment industry. They became living testaments to what it means to love openly, to risk everything, and to seek freedom in sincerity. Leslie's courage did not erase the prejudices of society, but it did break down the wall of silence, letting light shine on those who yearned to be themselves. What made that moment unforgettable was not only its boldness, but also its tenderness. Leslie did not express his love through scandal or defiance, but through tenderness. He simply called out the name of the person who mattered most to him, and in doing so, he brought hope to thousands of people who had been told that their love was wrong. Looking back, that night in 1997 is considered one of the most powerful acts of truth in the history of Asian entertainment. It was a moment when art and life intersected, when a man who had portrayed so many tragic love stories on screen finally found the love of his life. And that is why Leslie Cheung was more than just a star. He was a symbol of courage. His love for Daffy Street, once hidden, became the very thing that defined his legacy. Not a scandal, but a story of sincerity, dedication, and humanity. As the years passed and the curtain drew closer in the 1990s, Leslie Cheung's halo of fame no longer spoke for itself. To millions, he remained a shining star, but to those who truly knew him, the weight of invisible battles became harder to conceal. The laughter, the charm, the natural radiance on stage, all of these often masked a man who was quietly drowning in inner turmoil. Behind closed doors, Leslie struggled with the shadows that fame could not erase. Sleepless nights, creeping doubts, and the heavy hand of sadness that clung to him no matter how bright the lights. Those close to him began to sense the struggle. They witnessed moments when the smile did not reach his eyes, when the fatigue lingered long after the music had stopped. The pressure to be perfect, to live not just as an artist but as an icon, gnawed at him every day. While his voice continued to bring comfort to countless fans, there were nights when even the stage, his refuge for decades, could not dispel the pain. In 2002, he took on a role that seemed almost prophetic. Inner Senses is a psychological thriller about illusions, delusions, and the fragility of the human mind. Leslie plays a psychiatrist who struggles to lead others out of darkness, but is himself drawn into despair. His performance is captivating, but for those who know his inner struggles, it is frighteningly real. The film's themes of isolation and mental anguish are so close to his own, it's as if he is no longer just acting, but exposing fragments of his own truth to the screen. Many later described it as a strange premonition, art reflecting a pain that words could not express. Then, on April 1st, 2003, tragedy struck. The news spread throughout Hong Kong and beyond. Leslie Cheung had committed suicide. The shock was immediate, the grief overwhelming. Fans poured into the streets, their grief spilling over into tears and candlelit vigils. The neon lights, once symbols of a vibrant city, were now dimmed in a mist of mourning. The world asked the same impossible question. How could a man who had brought so much joy, who had embodied beauty and strength, live in such deep sorrow that he was forever silenced? At the center of this grief was Daffy Tong. The cameras at the funeral captured an image that still lingers today. Daffy clutching Leslie's portrait to his chest, his body shaking, his face etched with grief. It was more than a spouse grieving a loved one. It was the raw truth of a love that had endured decades of secrecy, sacrifice, and devotion. There were no words to measure such a loss, no words powerful enough to contain the grief. There was only silence, broken by sobs, and the image of a man holding on to the last tangible reminder of the other. It was a pain so pure, so selfless, that it seemed to echo throughout the city. For fans, it was a huge shock. They had idolized Leslie as a superstar, but in Daffy's tears, they saw the man behind the legend, a man who loved and was loved with a depth of love that most people can only dream of. The loss was no longer that of an icon, but of a man whose wounds had finally been laid bare. Condolences poured in from around the world. Flowers lined the sidewalks, letters piled up, and songs played over and over again. Each note now heavier, filled with longing. Films like Rouge and Farewell My Concubine were revisited, no longer as works of art, but as rays of light that illuminated the soul of a man whose sensitivity had always been his greatest gift and his greatest burden. Yet amid the grief, one undeniable truth rose above the sadness. Leslie Cheung's love story with Daffy Tong did not end in death. The image of Daffy alone at the funeral, broken, defenseless, and all too human, spoke louder than any words. It was the end of a love story, written not in fame, but in loyalty, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion. Leslie's passing has left a scar that will never fully heal, but his legacy lives on, in his songs, in his films, and in the courage to live an authentic life. He reminds us that even the brightest stars can be fragile, and that sometimes the people who bring us the most light are fighting the darkest battles. And so we remember him. Not just as an idol who lit up the stage, not just as an actor who changed cinema, but as a man of infinite beauty and infinite pain. His story is not one of fame or tragedy, but of humanity at its rawest. Tonight, as we think of Leslie Cheung, let us embrace him with sadness, with love, and with gratitude. For he dared to live, he dared to love. And in the end, he showed us the most heartbreaking truth of all, that even legends bleed, and even legends can be broken. 2 decades have passed since that tragic day in 2003, but Leslie Cheung's memory has never faded. His music still resonates on radio and playlists, his films are still shown on the big and small screens, and his influence remains deeply ingrained in Hong Kong culture and beyond. But perhaps his most enduring legacy lies not just in the roles he played or the songs he sang, but in the love story he lived. A love that continues to inspire, comfort, and remind us of the strength it takes to be true to ourselves. 20 years after Leslie's death, Daffy Tong remains steadfast. He has never sought a replacement, never let his heart stray. While the world moves on, Daffy chooses to live quietly, cherishing the memories of a bond that shaped his life. His loyalty was not born of duty, but of devotion. A devotion that time and distance do not diminish. In a world where relationships often falter under the pressures of modern life, Daffy's fidelity was a rare and powerful testament that true love does not always end in death, that it can live on in memory, in action, in silence. Fans often remember Leslie through his songs, and some of his tunes have taken on deeper meaning since his passing. Songs like Chase, 1995, and Love of the Past, 1993, are no longer just ballads of longing and nostalgia. They are now hymns of remembrance. To listen to them is to hear Leslie's voice echoing through time, as if still singing to Daffy, still singing to the millions who mourned him, still singing to anyone who has ever loved deeply enough to understand the pain of loss. Each lyric now sounds like a tribute, each note a whispered message from a man who gave his all, both in art and in love. It is rare for a love affair, especially one largely kept secret, to be remembered as one of the greatest love stories in a city as vibrant and chaotic as Hong Kong. And yet, people still call the love affair between Leslie Cheung and Natalie Tong the most beautiful love story Hong Kong has ever known. Not because it was perfect, not because it was without its struggles, but because it was true. It was tender in private and brave in public. It overcame the weight of secrecy, the glamour of fame, and even the brutality of tragedy. And in the end, it triumphed. Despite being written in a time and place where prejudice was rampant, it has touched the hearts of everyone who has ever longed to live authentically, to love without shame, to stand side by side with another human being against the tide of the world. For the LGBTQ+ community, especially in Asia, Leslie's life and love have become a beacon. At a time when being gay was still taboo, he dared to step forward, speak his truth, and publicly announce his partner to thousands of people. That single act opened doors that had long been closed, giving others the courage to believe that their love was valid and worthy of respect. The lesson here is not just about fame or glory, but about the power of vulnerability. Leslie showed us that being true to ourselves is not weakness, but the deepest form of strength. And Daffy showed us that loving someone with unwavering loyalty, even in silence and grief, is one of the deepest expressions of humanity. Together, they prove that love does not need to fit into society's narrow definitions to be extraordinary. Love, in its truest form, is extraordinary. For today's young people, for anyone living in a world that often demands conformity, Leslie and Daffy's story is a reminder that authenticity matters. That loving courageously, living authentically, is not just about honoring yourself, but about honoring your very nature. Their story whispers to us through time, don't be afraid. Love is worth it. Even if the world doesn't understand, love anyway. And so Leslie Cheung's legacy is not just his iconic films or his timeless music. His legacy is this love, a love that has proven itself stronger than secrets, stronger than prejudice, even stronger than death. A love that continues to inspire, move, and teach. There are love stories that fade with the years, and there are love stories that become legends. But then there are love stories like Leslie and Daffy's. Stories that need no embellishment, no exaggeration, because their truth alone is enough to endure. Their love was etched into time itself, a bond that never fades, a devotion that never dies. And perhaps that is why, even now, people continue to honor them. Because deep down, we all recognize what they had, a rare, solid, soul-deep connection that reminds us of what love can be at its best. There are loves that don't need time to prove themselves, because they are already eternal. If this story has touched your heart, let it be more than just a memory. Take it with you, share it with others, and let it inspire you to live and love truly. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered and celebrated, please support this channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing. Together, let's preserve not only the music and movies, but also the love, the eternal love of Leslie Cheung and Daffy Tong. Leslie Cheung and Daffy Tong have proven that love, when true, is unbreakable. It defies fear, prejudice, and even time. Their story is not only a reminder of the past, but also a beacon for the future. to live authentically, to love fiercely, to never hide who you are. Let their story inspire you to always cherish love. If their legacy touches your heart, subscribe and share, because love like theirs deserves to shine forever.